And all right. Hey, everybody, this is Lars Light from the Somm Journal. Welcome to our very first winery close-up webinar of the year. It seems like such a long time, but it was middle of December that we were here, and we're back, and it hasn't really been that long, but it just seems like a lot has happened with the holidays in between. So on behalf of the Somm Journal, Somm Foundation, and the New Sotheby's Wine Encyclopedia by National Geographic Publishing, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Our theme is a cross-section of Western Europe. The old country, the old world, across the pond, whatever you want to call it. It is definitely the standard bearer for terroir and varietal typicity. A lot of the original icons hail from there. And we're going to delve into a little bit of a cross-section with some of Western Europe's iconic wines and winemakers. Just a reminder that this is being recorded on Facebook Live. It is also being recorded, and links will be available to the recording at sommjournal.com and sommfoundation.com. A printed recap of this webinar will appear in the April-May issue of Somm Journal. If you have not already subscribed to the Somm Journal, please send me a note. Either through the website or to Lars at sommjournal.com and let us know. It is a complimentary subscription to everybody that's in the trade. Speaking of everybody that's in the trade, we have some wonderful incentives for you to pay attention to today. Normally we have Lynn Fletcher telling us what's going on with Somm Foundation, but today we have Betsy Baker is here to tell us a little bit. Betsy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the wonderful incentives that the Somm Foundation is putting out for our viewers today?
Sure. Thank you, Lars, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining today. So we will do a random drawing for everyone who attended, and we will determine 8 recipients of Somm Geo for 1 year. If you are one of those lucky recipients, you will be notified on Monday. There will also be an essay competition. The top 2 winners will receive a copy of the New Sotheby's Wine Encyclopedia, and then the first place winner will receive a check for $400. So you'll receive a prompt following today's workshop by Monday, the 24th. Make sure you check your spam folder if it doesn't show up in your regular email. And then the essays will be due by Sunday, January 30th at 11 p.m. Pacific time. Winners will be announced by February 9th. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Betsy. $450 for writing an essay. That's a pretty good rate. So I also want to, if you haven't had the chance to see Somm Geo, you're going to get a little taste of it today. It's a fantastic program. I always like to call it where Google Earth meets the wine world. And we have with us today the gentleman, the brains behind it, gentleman who developed it, Greg Van Wagner, longtime sommelier at Jimmy's. And he's created this wonderful program, and he's going to share it with us a little bit today by giving us a little bit of a walk around to tell us where we're going. So Greg, why don't you give us an overview of our romp through Western Europe today?
Fantastic. Thank you, Lars, so much. It's great to be here. So yeah, we have the Somm Geo tour, which you'll see it's part of a larger platform that has in-depth wine theory for all the world's notable wine regions, tours that cover all the classics as well as the emerging regions, and over 100 high-res paper maps for print and download. But we're going to be going all around Europe. We're going to be starting off actually in Germany with Dr. Lozen. We have Italy well represented. Here we have in the Veneto, the crew of Cartizze. We'll go more into that later. Medici Hermiti, down to representing Tuscany as well as Piedmont, Guinigi wines, and over to France, the wines of Picpoul de Pinet. Finally, we're going to head to Spain. Say Solo, so really great cross-section. Now, starting off in Germany, really, this is the world's greatest place to grow Riesling, right? They have half of the world's Riesling. You have cool climate, high latitude. Here we see on the northeast corner of France. And really, when you have this cool climate, high latitude, requires these steep slopes to maximize ripeness. Also in the Mosel, right? You have the Eifel Mountains and the Hunsrück Hills. That helps to shelter the region. And the Mosel River, which helps to moderate the temperatures. Now here we go. The wines of Dr. Lozen. I've been to this winery. This area is an absolutely stunning area. Truly special place. Slate soils help to reflect heat back to the vines at night. You can see pretty obviously where vines are planted and where they aren't. One thing I really love about Germany is kind of like in Burgundy, right? They figured out the best sites 400 or 500 years ago, and those are still the best sites today. Here we are, incredible area. If you have the chance to get out there, I highly, highly recommend it. And I'm excited to hear more.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Greg, or should I say Herr von Wagner? It seems appropriate today. And very, very pleased. You know, one of the beautiful things about Western Europe is its traditions. And we have very much respected tradition and innovation combined with Ernst Lossen, who is here to present his wines about Dr. Lossen Winery from Middle Mosel in Germany. Ernst, welcome. I think you're on mute. Ernie, you're on mute. Ernie, if you can hear me, nobody else can hear you. You're on mute. Kirk, are you able to?
Sorry. Yeah.
That's all right.
Sorry. So the Mosel, where we are, is basically rated the most northern wine growing region here in Germany, or historically even in Europe. It is basically the River Mosel. Took 200 million years to dig the valley, you know, to dig the valley into what we call the slate hills of the Rhineland. And that is basically the reason that we are able to grow wine, because if you look here into the mountainsides, it's far too cold up there to ripen grapes. You barely get the potatoes ripe up there. But it is the valley, basically the steep slopes, which gives us the chance to ripen the grapes. And that's the reason also that we have what we call three microclimates, which are very important to ripen the Riesling. And so you can roughly say the vineyard we look at is as more south facing the slopes are, as better because they get sunshine from morning to the evening. As steeper the slopes are, as more direct inclination of sunshine into the soil, as warmer the vineyard, as better it is. And as more close the vineyard to the river, as better it is, because it gets the moderating influence of the water to the vineyard. So roughly you can say as more south facing, as more steep, and as more close to the river, as more Grand Cru the vineyards are. And that basically ends up in a classification. This is a classification we used to belong to the Prussian government between 1816 and 1918. And the Prussian government in the middle of the 19th century, 1846, made a classification for the Mosel. And it is the three-tier system as we know it from Burgundy. This classification is even older than the Burgundy classification. And the three-tier system, all the dark brown spots you see on the map, these are basically the first growth vineyard site, what they call in Burgundy Grand Cru. The medium brown spots are the second growth vineyard sites, what they call in Burgundy Premier Cru. And the higher elevated and side-ready pale brown spots are basically the third growth vineyard sites, the village. And you see all the dark brown spots are all south facing, you know. These are all the south facing spots which are Grand Cru rated, and the very steep spots, you know. We introduced today a very, 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 highly rated vineyard, a very famous Grand Cru for the Mosel. It's called the Sundial Vineyard, the Wehlener Sonnenuhr Vineyard. Wehlen is the village, the Sonnenuhr means sundial, and the sundial in the name of a vineyard, you can imagine, already gives you an indication that it is 100% south-facing vineyard, you know. And so it's a great vineyard because you see from 8 to 6 o'clock, you have the whole sunshine during the whole day. So the full sunshine gives you ripeness, because that is basically our problem if you're so north to get the grapes ripe. The typical soil in our area, you see it already, the surrounding cliffs, you know, is the slate soil here in the Mosel. This is the slate soil of the Wehlener Sonnenuhr. You can say we have only maximum 1 meter topsoil, and from the topsoil, 60–70% is only stones, and then the pure cliff starts, you know. And this high content of these kind of slate stones gives a very good drainage to the soil, and that is also one of the reasons that we are one of the, very few regions, or possibly one of the only region, at least in Germany, which never had been hit by phylloxera, you know. This soil never gave us phylloxera. We still have uncrafted wines, Front de Pied, which are more than 130 years old. The vineyard which we introduce here, where we harvested this wine, is from a 130-year-old vineyard on their own roots, planted by my great-grandfather. And so we're still doing it. We don't replant. These wines can be getting very old if they're still on their own roots. So the wine which we have now in the class, or you have in the class, is the 2015 Wählener Sonnenuhr, Wählen the village, Sonnenuhr the vineyard, sundial vineyard, a reserve. Alte Reben means vieille vigne, old vines. In this case, we have still about 10 hectares original rootstocks, which are all over 100 years old. And so here we call them vieille vigne, old vines. This wine is called reserve because it is produced still in the style as my great-grandfather made dry wines. And here we select only the oldest vineyards, you know, and this vineyard is called, we use the Le D on the label. And these very old vineyards, we all know as older the vineyard is, as more deficit flowering. So we have a lot of what the French call mille rondage, hen and chicks, you know, of grapes. And these hen and chicks, you know, gives these little berries, you know, deficit flowering, no seeds in there. And this makes very, very complex wines. And what we do, we select all these, these kind of mille rondage fruit, we select out in a separate bucket, everybody of our pickers have 3 buckets, a black bucket and a red bucket, and these little white buckets. And all the grapes are selected. We are on a river. We always have botrytis. We select the botrytis out, medium botrytisized fruit, fully botrytisized fruit, which makes noble sweet wines. But these healthy grapes and these mille rondage grapes, we select out and put it in this black bucket. And that makes our dry wines because we don't want to have any botrytis. We don't allow any botrytis in our dry wines. The winemaking is pretty simple. We ferment all our juice, all our dry wines in the traditional Fuder casks, which are 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 liters, the German oak, you know. The wine, after fermentation, if it is dry, we sulfur it, top it up, and then we leave it, the reserve wines, 2 years, 24 months in the barrel on the full yeast, but no batonnage. No steering, you know, they're sitting on the full yeast for 2 years, 24 months. Then we rack it off the yeast, we bottle it, and then we give the wines another 4 years in the bottle before we release it. That's the reason you're tasting now the 2015. The 2015 was just released, 2 years in the barrel on the full yeast, no batonnage. That is the traditional winemaking as my grandfather did it between 1880 and 1928. When filters had been invented, you know, when the filters had been invented, they didn't have to wait that long anymore, and so they could do this, you know. Yeah, that was the short introduction about our area. This, by the way, is our winery.
Fantastic, beautiful winery. Thank you, and in perfect German timing too. Thank you very much, Ernie. So, you know, can you just talk to me very, very briefly about German oak? It's something I had not heard about before. Obviously, I'm very fortunate enough to be able to be tasting this wine right now. There's no oak influence per se. Obviously, the oak is helps wines oxygenate. I mean,
German oak is the same like French oak is oak. An oak tree here in Europe is the same kind of type of oak, you know. We have a lot of oak here. And I mean, I know that our forests are also selling a lot of oak to France. But that's common. That is nothing really tricky, you know. But here, German oak was always used for making barrels, but we have the tradition of big barrels, Fuder barrels, you know. But you're right, we don't use new oak for our wines, you know. That means we still buy a lot of new oak, I mean, big barrels, but in the first 2-3 years, we don't use it for our Grand Cru vineyards, you know. In the first year, we do only water in there, you know, to get most of the oak out, you know. In the second year, we do only the village in there. In the third year, we do only Premier Cru in there. And from the fourth year, we use it for the Grand Crus because we don't like the oak taste with the Riesling. It doesn't work, you know. I mean, you know, oak is an acidity, Riesling is a high acidity yielding grape, and then oak, the oak acidity and the Riesling acidity that don't match together.
Right.
We don't do malolactic fermentation, you know.
Okay.
Therefore, we keep the acidity with our wines. That is the backbone of Riesling.
It's the beauty of Riesling, as far as I'm concerned. But I agree, oak should be a tool, not an ingredient. Yes. So thank you very much, Ernie. That was a fascinating presentation. Much appreciated. Greg, where is our next stop on this Euro tour?
So we are headed over to the Veneto in Northeast Italy. And really when you're looking at the Veneto for top wine regions, you're looking in the foothills of the Alps. This is really where all of the highest quality regions of the Veneto are. Specifically today, we are headed to a very, very special zone for Prosecco, Conegliano, Valdobbiadene. So as you can see, you know, Prosecco can be made across a large section of the Veneto as well as freely. And these wines are specific to this one really special zone, really completely different. And specifically, we're talking about the wines of Cartizze. So this is, you could call it the Grand Cru of the region, 108 hectares, really special hillside that's producing, you know, really the top exploration of the Glera grape. And this shot that we see at the end, just really, really incredible. I've never been there. I've always wanted to. People that have been there have just said that it's unlike anything you ever see on the face of the planet. So I'm excited to hear more.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've had the pleasure actually of harvesting in Prosecco, and it's definitely heroic viticulture, not dissimilar to what's going on in Riesling. But to tell us more about it, today we have Federica Gaiotti, who is with the Research Center for Viticulture and Enology in Conegliano, Valdobbiadene, and Cartizze. She's presenting a beautiful Valdobbiadene Superiore Cartizze that the consortium has put together. It's not a brand per se, but speaking about this wonderful territory, which I think Prosecco has obviously gotten a certain imagery and popularity, but there are some real gems out there that need to be appreciated, especially to us in the Somme world. So Federica, buongiorno, and tell us, how do you communicate the peculiarities and uniqueness of the terroir of Cartizze?
Hello, buongiorno everybody, and thanks for your introduction. I share my screen.
Great.
So as Greg introduced the production area of the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore, the OCG is the beautiful hilly area that you see in this picture. And this area is characterized by a very complex orography. So to understand this terroir and its link with the Prosecco Superiore wines, we carried out a comprehensive zoning study of all the denomination. And thanks to this study that it's described in this book on the terroirs of Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco wines, we cannot tell how difference in terms of soils, of microclimates, elevation, or exposure give rise to different organoleptic expression of our Prosecco wines. Here you see a map of the denomination, and here we have different Prosecco wines produced in this area, and they are represented in the pyramid of quality. The basic product is the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG that is produced in all the 15 communes of the denomination. Then the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore Rive, and the Rive selection is produced only in vineyards on steep slopes and in specific municipalities or villages. And at the top of the quality pyramid, we have the Valdobbiadene Superiore di Cartizze DOCG. That is the Grand Cru of the denomination, and it's the wine selection that you are tasting with us. The Cartizze is a small area of just 108 hectares, and it is composed of a series of hills characterized by quite steep slopes and a perfect south exposition. And there are some characteristics that make this area and its Prosecco wines unique and different from the rest of the denomination. First of all, the soil. The soil in the Cartizze is unique and different from all the other soils in this denomination. And the soil of the Cartizze are based on ancient sedimentary rocks of marine origin. And in fact, it's quite common to find fossils if you walk and look at the soils in this area. And this bedrock has been shaped over the time to form soils with a clay loam texture and very rich in limestone. And this high limestone content plays a very important role in the wine quality because it's often associated with the aromatic complexity, but also with the olfactory intensity of the wines of this area. The climate in the Cartizze is also unique, and this is for two reasons. The first is the south orientation of this hills and also the steep slopes that favor the perfect exposition of the vineyards to the sunlight. And this is very important for the optimal ripening of the grapes. But also in these hills, there is a constant breeze that blows from the mountains at the back. And these mitigate the temperatures during the summer and help maintaining good acidity in the grapes, but also keep the canopy dry and prevent the diffusion of the disease. Last but not least is the age of the vineyards, because most of the vineyards in the Cartizze are quite old, with several examples of vines up to 80 or 100 years old. And why is this associated with a greater quality? Because these old vines have reached over the time a perfect balance with the cultivation side. They develop deep root system able to find water and nutrients in the deep soils layers, but also stabilized a favorable relationship with the microorganisms and with the microflora and microfauna in these soils. So these old vines can guarantee a good and steady quality over the years. So in synthesis, the positive combination of climate, soil, and vine age allow for the production of very good quality grapes in this specific area. And it means high sugar content, optimal acidity level, and also high amounts of aroma compounds. Coming to the wine, the classic Valdobbiadene Superiore di Cartizze comes in the dry version, and it means with a residual sugar between 17 and 32 grams per liter. And the official bottle of the consortium, that is the wine that you are tasting, has a sugar content of around 25 grams per liter. What's remarkable in this wine is, I think you can perceive it, the perfect balance between the sugar and acids. And in fact, the palate, this one is very soft and crisp. And as we said, there's a high content of aroma compounds that makes the sensory profile of this wine very full and rich, with a lot of fruity notes, like pear, peach, or apricot, but also hints of flavors. These characteristics make the Cartizze wine really unique and easily recognizable from the other Prosecco wines produced in denomination. I think I finished, and I wish you can have the chance to taste our wines, and also welcome you to visit our terroirs in Conegliano, Valdobbiadene. Thank you.
Grazie, Federica. That was beautiful. I have to say, when you started that last slide, I took a sip, and then by the time you started talking about peach and apricot, that's exactly what I was getting on the finish. The wine's got some beautiful elegance on the attack, and then just finishes with this beautiful round fruit flavor on the finish. So compliment, very nice, beautiful wine. All right, Greg, I hope you've got some of your sound issues worked out a little bit. Let's see what is our next stop on the Euro tour.
Absolutely. So we
just lost you, Greg. You looks like you're muted.
Yes, we're headed to Emilia Romagna, the classic area for Lambrusco. but also known for some of the most famous foods in Italy. Between prosciutto di Parma, we have balsamic vinegar of Modena, and a number of different unique pastas. All of these regions here are specialists in the Lambrusco family of grapes. I believe there's about 15, and each of them has distinct characteristics. Here we have Medici Hermiti. In my opinion, I've had these wines before. Just my favorite producer of Lambrusco. They have 80 hectares, all farmed organically, and focus solely on really, really high quality Lambrusco. Here we have a great shot of the winery, and back to Lars for more.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Greg. So, yeah, I was actually in Parma last year in September and had some wonderful Lambruscos to wash down all those nice, rich foods, which is the real, to me, the real wonderful secret of good Lambrusco. And Alessandro Medici from the historic family of Medici Hermiti in Reggio Emilia is here to tell us about his Lambrusco and using the example of his Concerto organic Reggiano Lambrusco. Welcome, Alessandro.
Ciao Lars, next time come to visit us, first of all.
I will, I promise.
So thank you for the introduction, Greg. I am Alessandro Medici. Good morning, everybody. I represent the 5th generation of the Medici family. Our winery is called Medici Hermiti, and from 132 years we produce Lambrusco. Our region, as Greg said, is called Emilia Romagna. That is between the north and the center of Italy. It's one of the most dynamic region. That's why it's called the Motor Valley. You know, brands like Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati are from our area. And we're called also the Food Valley. As Greg said, we have several food products from here. Because Emilia Romagna is considered one of the most fertile area in the whole world. This is one of our estates. In total, we have 80 hectares of vineyards. In 5 estates, and this is for us the most important, where we produce our most important Lambrusco. Here you can see how is usually the agriculture and the viticulture in our land. You know, it happens like the 95% on a flat land, but behind our estate we have these soft hills and these mountains that create this chain that is called Apennine. The Apennine chain divides perfectly Emilia-Romagna region from Tuscany region. And this chain of mountain is very important because it creates the perfect microclimate for the viticulture in Emilia-Romagna. So here we have the production of Lambrusco, that is our wine, but to make Lambrusco wine, we have to produce Lambrusco grape. Because Lambrusco is the name of a grape. So it's exactly like to say Riesling, to say Sangiovese, to say Nebbiolo. It's the name of a grape, and it has a particular characteristic because Lambrusco is a family of different varieties that usually compose the Lambrusco grape, the Lambrusco family. We have around 50, but you know, growers today have developed mainly 6 different Lambrusco varieties. And here you can read all the most important varieties of Lambrusco. All these characteristics, all these varieties have different names. They grow on different soils and they have different organoleptic characteristics. So a different residual of sugar, a different tannin, but they have a common characteristic that is acidity. Because the acidity of Lambrusco, the pH, especially for the 4th variety that you can read here, the Lambrusco di Sorbara, is one of the highest in Italy. We talk about in every single vintage about a pH that is between 2.5, 2.7. You know, it's very close to the pH that producers have in the Champagne area. So it's perfect to make sparkling wines. Because Lambrusco is a red and sometimes a rosé with a shorter skin contact sparkling wine made with Lambrusco grape. And the real Lambrusco is always dry, so with a low level of sugar. This is a very important point because I'm sure that you heard in the past about the sweet Lambrusco. The sweet Lambrusco was a commercial invention from the 80s that, you know, has been one of the best seller wine in the world. but that wasn't the real Lambrusco. The real Lambrusco is dry with a very, very low level of sugar and with a high level of acidity. It's made by several varieties of Lambrusco grapes, as I said previously, and is produced with 3 different methods of production. We have the Charma method, that is basically the 95% of the production. So the second fermentation happens in the still tank, and it lasts between 1 and 5, 6 months. We have the Champenoise method. So the second fermentation happens like for the Champagne or Franciacorta in the bottle for several months or a year. And at the end of the fermentation, we have the dégorgement, just to remove the yeast. And then we have the most historical method. So the original method of production of Lambrusco, this is the ancestral method or the Pednat method. So the second fermentation happens always in the bottle, but without the final dégorgement. So we leave the yeast and we sell the wine with yeast inside. Now we move to the final part of my presentation, because I would love to explain our flagship wine. This is our Concerto, that in English means concert. It is an organic wine, and it is one of the pioneers of the good quality Lambrusco, because it is the first single vineyard Lambrusco ever produced. It was 1993, the first vintage of production. And believe me, the image of Lambrusco at the time was very, very bad, because all the world thought Lambrusco like a sweet wine. So my family wanted to change this reputation, making a great quality Lambrusco, starting from the land, starting from the vineyard. So we created the first single vineyard, the first cru Lambrusco, on a soil made mainly by clay, that is crucial to make Lambrusco. We decided to use the Lambrusco Salamino variety, 100%, because Salamino for us is the most balanced variety of Lambrusco, between the fruit, between the tannin, and between the acidity, that here is very, very important. It is dark, it's really red, because Lambrusco is red with bubbles and dry. Bubbles that we make with the Charma method for this wine. That is a quite long Charma method that lasts between 5 and 6 months. And for this reason, we get these very gently and elegant bubbles. So we have acidity, we have tannin, we have bubbles. So we are talking about a very versatile, a very drinkable, a very refreshing wine. I actually don't have the time to tell you all the pairings that I would love to suggest. I will write on the chat later, but this is a really versatile wine. As last time, I would love to conclude telling you that it's very hard to say that Lambrusco is the most important variety that you can find in the world, but it's very easy to say for me that Lambrusco is one of the most gastronomic, one of the most versatile, and one of the most drinkable and refreshing wine that you can find in the world, because you could pair with our cuisine from any international dishes. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Alessandro. So I have to say the color is phenomenal, and you can see that beautiful schiuma, that beautiful fizz. What would you say is the ideal type of glass to serve a good Lambrusco like this in?
Yeah, we discussed about this before, and I answered you all glasses except flute, because Lambrusco is beautiful fruity aroma, so we don't need to close. Also, the temperature is really important, not too cold. That's very important, not at champagne temperature, for example, because it's a red wine. You know, it has bubbles, I know, this is unique, but in the same time it's red, so it has this beautiful aroma that we need to preserve in the tasting.
Excellent. And in 10 seconds or less, name the top 3 international cuisines, wine pairings that you would have with this wine.
Japanese ramen, very similar to a tortellini, a beautiful oily Mexican taco, and American barbecue or burgers that I personally love it.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Alessandro. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, Greg, what's our next stop here?
So we are headed to Tuscany as well as Piedmont, but our first stop is here in Tuscany. Guinigi wines, classic Mediterranean climate that's really perfect for Sangiovese. These are the top regions that you can see, which are really all inland for Sangiovese. Chianti Classico, Chianti, and Brunello di Montalcino. Bordeaux varieties, 5 more so coast. And then we're also going to be talking about Piedmont, specifically wines of Barolo, Friolo, the king of grapes. This is definitely the area you want to be in for it. Some of the best known in the world, and definitely a classic region. And with the winery, one thing I really love about this, winery sustainability and the practices that you use there are becoming more and more of a conversation, and with great reason. And I work on it. And here is the namesake tower. And back to Lars for more.
All right, thank you, Greg. So Guinigi, the name Sebastiani is a very well-known name in American viticulture, but we don't always associate it with Italian other than Italian-American. And here with the decidedly least accented English of the day, we have August Sebastiani, a proprietor of Three Badge, or is it okay, August, if I call you Augusto for this presentation?
Quite all right.
Guinigi Wines.
Thank you very much. Really excited to be a part of this conversation. Unique, obviously, in that I am a world away from the source of the wines I'm here to talk about. But that's an important part of my story and our story here at Three Badge. So long story long, Three Badge Beverage is a continuation of a long family story as it pertains to wine here in the Sonoma Valley. My great-grandfather, Samuele, moved in the late 1800s. And so that makes me fourth generation here in Sonoma. My grandfather and namesake took the reins in the mid 1940s and actually really focused what was then a very robust and diverse family entity on the agricultural piece and really understanding what Sonoma meant for New World wines, helping with many other pioneers to put Sonoma and Napa on the map as it pertains to grape growing and wine production. My dad and his brother, actually in the picture you see next to him, helped to kind of focus on the branded business. And here I stand, proud to kind of carry that legacy in a pretty unique way. We've been out of the old family ranch now for some time, but what Three Badge has provided us with is a great opportunity to talk a little bit about the family component and our connection to philanthropy in here in our Sonoma Valley. And we bought a firehouse, and the Three Badge story is a connection to my grandfather's time as a volunteer firefighter here in this very firehouse. So as you can see behind me is a picture of the old Sonoma Plaza. And again, we're here happy to talk about who we are and what we're about. But today, the topic of conversation is our wines we call Guinigi. So we are, as many know, a negociant in wine and in spirits both. We have a very robust spirits portfolio, a very unique wine portfolio. We source wines in a number of ways and spirits in a number of ways to get from with wine, grape to bottle. And so as purveyors, we are searching high and low all over, obviously, Sonoma, the area of Northern California, and into actually Washington and Oregon as well. But sourcing wines from Italy, which again is such a huge part of our family story. Growing up, knowing that we were very entrenched in the local wine program, we never had California wines around the table. And as I was a young adult, getting to know some of these wines we were drinking, specifically Barolo, which continues to be a very dear favorite of my old man's. He continues to drink wines to this day. And the story being that New World wines, that California wines specifically, while lovely in their own right, don't quite have the same food pairing offerings that Old World wines do. And it comes with, a little bit more tannic structure, but sometimes, higher acidity that doesn't quite overpower the food, but that complements it well. And so that's where we focus on Guinigi, a unique tower that's actually situated in the old part of Lucca. Lucca is an important town for my family. We spend a lot of time talking about my dad's side and its connection to the old world, but my family's closer to my mom's side. My mom's parents, immigrants themselves, they've since passed, God bless them, but actually met here in San Francisco, and we're very, very close to their family and speak with them, fairly regularly. When we visit, Lucca happens to be a little bit of a hub for all parts Northern Italy. We've got Ligurian cousins, we've got Tuscany cousins, and we spend a lot of time, obviously, with this Guinigi Tower, dates all the way back to the 1300s. So iconic to our connection to the old world. It was, part of building the brand story, right? A lot of people see that picture and they don't even realize what it is or where it is, but it's such an iconic photograph that it really, really stands out. So as mentioned, we look at Barolo specifically. That's obviously grown in Northwest Italy, at the foot of the Alps, providing very favorable climate. That climate seasonally can sway considerably, especially during harvest, which the temperature swings provide a very robust grape in very limestone clay soils. And what you end up with is a grape in a Nebbiolo that can be quite fickle. If you actually go back 30 years, we looked at actually growing Nebbiolo here in Sonoma. It didn't quite fare so well. It was a little bit of an experiment, knowing full well that it was doomed to fail, but hey, why not? Let's give it a shot. So, Barolo is actually a late, Nebbiolo actually typically is a late harvest wine. In fact, historically, for many, it actually used to be a sweet wine. It was harvested as late as it was. As we look at our 2016 DOCG, Barolo 100% Nebbiolo, we are really proud of it. I, specifically with a food pairing, would probably put it with ossobuco. It's kind of the first thing. Braised veal is really just takes me back to when I was first learning about wine. This is a wine we're really proud to state is a 94-point rating from our friends at the tasting panel. And so as we roll our reds out to really add some cachet to this brand Guinigi, in addition to a Prosecco, in addition to a Pinot Grigio, we've got a full flight of reds coming online here shortly that we're really, really proud to talk about. Next, we have our Brunello di Montalcino. As mentioned, the Tuscany is again so important to kind of who we are as a family, and it's another wine that is a little bit higher elevation, right? It's at the foothills of the Alps, one of the driest climates in Tuscany, and as you look at specifically the 2015 season, as we are now releasing, it was kind of hailed as a well-balanced vintage. Now, both of these wines, with a 2016 Brunello and a 2016 Barolo and a 2015 Brunello, are showing quite well, but still quite young. I mean, these are, again, California wines we drink in 15 minutes, right? But you look at some of these old world wines, you got to lay them down, give them, 8, 10, maybe 15 years before they really, really start to open up. This guy here, the Brunello, specifically, I would probably pair with some gamey meats, maybe like a wild boar, right? Maybe something along those lines might be kind of fun too. The other piece that I will proudly state on our Brunello is a 93-point rating here from our friends at the tasting panel. So we're really proud to show off both these wines. We're really proud to launch this brand, or the brand had been launched, but to launch an additional lineup of pretty unique reds here within the brand. And thank you very much for having me, and really excited to be a part of the panel.
Thank you, Augusto. The wines are really beautiful. They both show they're super clean. They show great typicity. They're beautiful wines. And, here in New York, we're going on 1 o'clock. So you guys got me anxious for lunch. Very nice. Compliments on the Guinigi wines.
Thank you very much.
All right, Greg, what's our next stop?
Perfect. We'll be headed to France, August. There we go. So we are headed to France, specifically southern France, into the Languedoc, where we have Mediterranean climate, warm, sunny days, about more than 300 sunny days a year. Cool nights really help with the acidity and freshness. Now, two distinct regions here. We're talking Roussillon, bordering Spain, and then also the Languedoc. Here we have some of the classic regions, Corbière. We're talking about Picpoul de Pinet, right there by the lagoon. If you ever take the TGV, you go right on that little strip of land right next to it. It's really, really incredible countryside. And so we're talking the Picpoul grape. They call this the Muscadet of the South, classic with oysters and fresh seafood, and infinitely drinkable. Really love these wines. And back to Lars for more.
All right, thank you, Greg. That those days of sunshine sound really good while I'm sitting here in a New York winter. So with us to bring us to the evening in France, we have Mathias Michelin, who is the export manager at Les Costilla De Pomeron and La Confrérie des Domaines. So he's been 10 years in international experience, has his MBA, his WSET, all those impressive things. But most important to me is that he is the son of a winemaker in Languedoc. So Mathias, bonsoir, welcome, and tell us a little bit about what makes Picpoul so unique.
Hello. Yes, thank you for having me here. I'll start sharing my screen and tell you all about Picpoul. Okay. So we're going to start with a short video because I thought it was interesting to see a bit more about the landscape. So I'll be presenting you Les Costilla De Pomeron. We are actually a wine cooperative in the south of France, as Greg mentioned. I'll be presenting our flagship wine from a unique appellation and a unique grape variety that is Picpoul de Pinet that you've seen just now on the screen. Picpoul being the grape variety and Pinet being the city, the little town, actually, a little village where it's from.
Mathias, sorry to interrupt, but we're not seeing your presentation.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Oh, sorry. I just forgot to click on the... Now you can see, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Just bring us to full screen. Great.
Yeah. I just forgot to click on that. Yes, so sorry to start again. So, Les Costilla De Pomeron, wine in the south of France, presenting flagship wine Picpoul de Pinet that you've just seen on the screen. Picpoul being the grape variety, and Pinet being the little town, little village we're from. We're located right by the Mediterranean Sea. You'll see just now here the Tow Lagoon. So it's a large body of salt water right in front of the Mediterranean Sea. You have the oyster beds. So that's also known as the perfect pairing with Picpoul, being a very crisp and refreshing wine. You see the forest and the plants, very Mediterranean. We've got hot and dry Mediterranean climate with two types of vineyards that we'll see in more details afterwards. One that is fresher and the other one that's more inland with hills and that's drier. So that's a Picpoul grape again. So that's, yeah, the vines overlooking the Tow Lagoon. So as I mentioned, we're a wine cooperative. So unlike the other presenters, we're not a small family-owned producers. There are about 350 vine growers. So a wine co-op is vine growers putting their resources together to have their own facility to make their wines. So we are a historical co-op in the region, starting in 1932. We have over 2,000 hectares. We produce a large amount of bottles, which is unusual for a wine co-op because most cooperatives sell in bulk to négociants. We do a very large portion, we produce a large portion in bottles, and 82% of whites and rosé, which is very unusual for the region. Languedoc is a lot more known for their red wines because the climate is more inclined to it, but we'll see why we have this particularity. And just to mention, half the vineyards is now certified sustainable. We have a number of growers that are converting to organic. We just started our first organic wines this year, and that's where we want to go in the future. So that's a little overview of the facilities. So we are right here between the town of Béziers and Sète, in front of the Mediterranean Sea. Very warm summers, mild winters. Extremely dry, a lot of sunshine. There are two, so it's clay and limestone, the vast majority of our soils, but there are two areas in our vineyards. The one that is next to the lagoon, and that has a big influence with the sea breeze coming in, the morning fogs that really keeps the grapes fresh. And it's also flat land. So this is where we'll have the higher acidity and the most refreshing type of wines coming from the vines. And the one that's a bit more inland, that's more hillsides, and it's got more southern exposures where we'll find more concentration in the grapes, and that's more for the reds and also the bit heavier whites. And we do two main appellations, so the Picpoul AOP and the IGP Côte de Taux. It's a small appellation in within that area because it's very distinctive. To you go 20 kilometers up north and you've got completely different wines because you don't have the Taux microclimate. So that's a little picture of the inland vines. So four things that I thought were a bit unique and different. So the Roman heritage. This is on the picture on the right. This is the Via Domitia. So that's a road that was built by the Romans since the 2nd century, and there are archaeological digs that shows that they were amphoras and they were making wines in this area since then. The Picpoul varietals, which I haven't spelled wrong, it's the variety is spelled that way. The appellation is spelled differently. So it's very outside of Picpoul appellation, which is small because it's only 1,600 hectares. Outside of this appellation, there is only about 100 hectares spread out across the world. So it's very, very unusual. You don't find anywhere else. And there are tracings of that grape variety that was named Picpoul in the 14th century. So it's very indigenous from that region. Then there is the Taux Lagoon, which makes the big difference, as I mentioned, a microclimate that brings the sea breeze and the fresh air. And that's why also we have 82% of whites and rosé. And the Cave Co-op, because we have a long history. The vine growers that are into the co-ops are from generations to generations. And having grown to that size has really enabled us to have top-notch equipment for the production of white wines and rosé. So just a few words about the Picpoul HB. That's the one that's imported in the US. So crisp, refreshing, racy type of wine, crystal clear color, citrus fruits, flower blossoms, apricots, and that's, as Greg mentioned, it's sometimes compared to the Muscadet of the South, you know, an unusual grape variety, and also next to the sea, oyster friendly. So yeah, that was the presentation.
Fantastic. Merci. So
yeah.
I'm so much enjoying the wine. You know, Greg mentioned before Roussillon and Marseillais, and this wine is just so much bright and crisp and delicious, and I can so much see it with oysters. Really refreshing wine. We're having it now after I'm tasting it now. Again, I'm very fortunate that I get to taste through these wines, but I'm having it after these big boys of Barolo and Brunello, and the wine just stands right up to it. Beautiful, bright acidity.
And it's very difficult if you do that on a blind tasting, like guessing the area where it's from, because there is no white wines in the south of France, in the Mediterranean climate that would stand out that way.
Absolutely. And if a quick word again, 15 seconds or less, about your choice of the closure of the twist off.
Oh yes. So the twist off. So that's mostly for export markets in France. To us, we prefer the screw cap because the screw cap, the cork will allow micro oxygenation, which we clearly don't want in this wine. And the screw cap for us is the best closure to retain that freshness. And you know, it's not a wine that's meant to be aged. You should drink it within the first 2 years. So we really thought this was the best thing to go with.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Absolutely. Thank you. So, Gregory, or shall I say, since we're in France, Grégoire, where is our last stop on this tour?
Yes, so we are headed to Spain. I actually just got back from a couple months in Spain, and the average quality of wine there is never been higher. It's really, really incredible. They're doing great work. Here we have Castilla y Leon. Specifically, what makes Spain interesting too is you have a wide range of indigenous varieties, but it's also the second highest average elevation country in all of Europe after Switzerland. So this elevation helps to temper some of the lower latitude. And you can just see if you look in the lower right-hand corner, most of this area, you know, we're at over 1,000 meters. So really, really important to the wines and what makes them classic. Here we are, Ribera de Duero, really one of the best areas in the world to grow Tempranillo. Old vines are extraordinarily important. There we have the town of La Hora, great area, great terroir. Here we have some old vines, and these are really what makes a lot of Ribera de Duero so special. Very concentrated, tiny berries that are smaller, you know, smaller than your thumbnail, but very, very intense fruit. And back to Lars for more.
All right. Thank you. Now I'll say gracias, Gregorio, as now that we're in Spain, and here to talk to us about his Se Solo, Ribera del Duero, is Javier Zaccagnini, un hombre español con un nombre italiano. Welcome, Javier.
Hi, Lars. How are you doing? Well,
Very
thanks for having invited me to talk about the terroir of Ribera del Duero. I think that well, I'll start the time so I know my 7 minutes are up. I'd like to convince you in these 7 minutes that we have a unique region in Europe. Unique, of course, doesn't mean the best at all, but very, very different. And why is that? Well, to understand that, we have to start by understanding how it was formed. And the Ribera del Duero, what is now Ribera del Duero, and other regions along the river, but basically started with a lake about 30 million years ago that was filled in slowly by a number of rivers. There was life in that lake, but a climate change about 5 million years ago dried it completely, bringing all these shells to the bottom along with all the materials the river have been bringing along. Let's see if I can show you something.
Great.
Let me see.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem to.
We can see it.
Can you? I can't. Can you see?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but but I don't. In fact, let me see.
Okay.
I can bring. Yeah, but it's not that what I wanted. What I wanted is this.
Okay.
Let me see if it starts moving in a moment. I hope. Yeah, it does.
Great.
Did you see my mouse? Do you see the little hand?
Yes.
Okay. You see, this is a flat top. This is another flat top here. The lake was here. All that. And in a certain moment, after being filled, dried, and refilled again, it broke because of seismic, and it stopped. And it all the water went over slowly all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and it made possible many regions. Ribera del Duero, the first of all, then it goes over to Rueda, Cigales, Toro, Arribes, all of them in Spain, crosses the Portugal border over to Vinho Verde and Alto Douro, ends up in Port. The lake went all the way there, carving the earth. And now I cannot see the rest of the presentation. Can you? Okay, yeah.
Yep, there you go. Now if you go forward.
So this is, this is Spain. We are here, number 14. That's the region. See, all that was a lake. It broke here. This is the river, the present river Duero that continues, as I said, all the way. Okay, the lake was broke, but it was continued to be filled in as it was emptying. So it took a number of thousands and thousands of years to carve the valley as it is now. We ended up with a tremendous, tremendous variation of soils. See, here's sandy, there you have stones, and I can show you clay, chalk, sulfate carbonate, and lime, everything. We have a tremendous mixture of soils, even within one plot. It is like Burgundy. When Burgundian enologists come to visit us and I take them around in the car, they see that every 200 meters, we're changing soils. And they say, mais c'est comme chez nous. Absolutely. Well, of course, we're not as famous, and my admiration for the many hundreds of years of Burgundy of making great wines. But we have the same tremendous variation of soils due to this explanation I gave to you. Now, but the most important thing to understand the terroir of our region is both things. One, this one you have here, the Tempranillo, which I'll come to a little later, and the climate. We have this region, let me see, we go back to the map, is about 80 kilometers long here, east to west, and 30 to 40 north to south. And we start at 700 meters of altitude and go up to more than 1,000. This makes us have very, very cold nights during the ripening period and not too warm days. We go from 35 degrees Celsius to 10 at night. So it's 20, even 25 degrees difference from day to night. That, you see the small berries, we have a Tempranillo with a smaller berry than elsewhere in Spain and with a thicker skin, which allows for more concentration of color and polyphenols and tannins in the grape. The climate is very special, as I said. We have very dry and cold winters. Then we have a short but very rainy spring. And then a summer that is hot but not too hot. And a long autumn that decides the quality of the grapes, because we may have frost in autumn. We have frost in April, for sure. There may be frost in end of September. So the Tempranillo, which means early ripener, has to ripen very quickly. It's a short ripening period, and it's perfectly adapted to the region. You know, the Tempranillo surprisingly doesn't seem to thrive elsewhere than in Spain, and has been planted in Texas, in California, New Zealand, in Hawke's Bay, Australia. Even a friend of mine who's a very good producer of Madiran has asked us to plant our grapes in Madiran. It doesn't work. Tempranillo seems to be exclusively to Spain. So this altitude, the Tempranillo, which is very unique in Ribera del Duero, and this tremendous change of temperatures between day and night is what makes us have this beauty. We have about 24,000 hectares, of which 10,000 are 10%, 3,000 are very old vines from 60 to 100 years old. As you can see, this is a type of old vines in Ribera del Duero. So I think that's it. My 7 minutes are over. Thank you very much.
Bravo. Gracias, Javier. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was fascinating. May I ask you to take your screen share down? So if you can just take your screen share, great. All right, so thank you, Javier. Again, gracias, dankeschön, grazie, merci to each of our brilliant panelists for this wonderful educational opportunity. Thank you, Greg. This is, I think the recurring theme here has been about some very unique grapes and terroir, tradition in terms of old, long time standing techniques, as well as I think a few areas that have not seen phylloxera, which is pretty fascinating to see as well. We're talking about old vines here has been a constant theme, but yet of course a lot of innovation in Europe as well. So remember to get your essays in. Betsy, you want to give us a little bit of reminder, and thank again to the Somm Foundation, but you want to give us a little reminder of what's at stake and what the deadlines are?
Sure, and thank you, Lars and Somm Journal, for putting this on. I'm with you. I'm on the Eastern time zone as well, and I'm starving now talking about all these food pairings. So thank you for doing this. So just a reminder, Monday will be the essay prompts going out, Monday the 24th, as well as our 8 lucky winners of Somm Geo. You will also be notified Check your spam folders if you don't get it on Monday, and it will be due on Sunday, January 30th by 11 p.m. and winners will be announced February 9th.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's close to lunchtime, and I think I'm going to have some of this beautifully balanced Ribera del Duero with me. A very fast question for you, Javier. I'm sorry to go backwards, but oak treatment, because I know a lot of times with beautiful wines of Spain, I always notice a little influence of American oak, and this wine is perfectly balanced. What is your oak treatment on this, Ribera?
Well, in Ribera del Duero, traditionally there was used American oak. I'm talking about 20 years ago. But for the last, let's say, more than 10, even 15 years, French oak is mainly dominating. I'm talking in general about most producers. Somehow we've moved completely to, excuse me, to French oak, and maybe with malolactic performed in American oak, and then racked to French oak for the period of aging. We at Say Solo use 600 little barrels. We don't use a small, normal 228 pièce Bourguignon. We use the Demi-Muit, 600 little barrels, and they're all French oak.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Sorry for that diversion, but I just had to get that point in, because again, another recurring theme with all of these wines is balance and elegance. They've all been beautiful.
Lars, by the way, you asked many others about the glass to use.
Yeah.
For Ribera del Duero Tempranillo, do not use a Tempranillo riddle glass.
All right.
It doesn't
Excellent.
work.
What would
Somehow,
you use?
I don't know. Then I have to talk to Mr. Riddle and redefine that glass. It goes very well in many other glasses.
Bordeaux glass?
Nebbiolo, Syrah, but certainly doesn't work with Tempranillo glass, I'm afraid.
All right. Well, that's a very good point, Javier. Thank you for sharing
That's
that.
my personal opinion.
Yes.
I don't know if everybody agrees.
Okay, it's all good. It's all personal. All right, so just a reminder that this is being recorded on Facebook Live, has been recorded, and you'll be able to find the recordings as well on somjournal.com and somfoundation.com. The printed recap will be in the April-May issue. And thank you again on behalf of the Somm Journal, Somm Foundation, for tuning in, and join us again on February 17th when we have a wonderful panel lined up for rising stars of the wine world. Another exciting webinar for you, another educational experience, and this has been great with these, definitely a group of rock stars from Europe. So thank you all very much, panelists and audience, for tuning in. Good evening, good day, good afternoon.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.